We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of The Murder Project. In this episode, we're going to be doing the debrief on the Kitty Genovese murder and what has been known as the bystander effect, or what's come to be known as the bystander effect. But not only that, but how exactly the bystander effect has seemed to not only transcend time, but also technology. For those of you that are new to the debrief, this is an episode where I sit down with my good friend and former police officer Mike Smith to discuss the cases further. In the debrief, we discuss the case from both sides of the aisles, theory that we might have, and anything we think needs a second look. The debrief is an unscripted and off-the-cuff commentary about the cases that we are currently covering. The hope of the debrief is to break the cases down further, but in a relaxed environment with the true crime we love, and also some laughter. So let's get the episode started. A Breaker 1-9, this is Redbeard. Mike Diesel, you got your ears on. Come on, buddy.
That's a big 10-4. How we doing, my man?
How are you, man? I'm good, man. I finished mowing, and it's hot, and my ride lawnmower broke down. So it's been terrible, actually.
Oh, I did not know that. That is unfortunate. But, you know, here in the Texas Panhandle, the high 80s, that's not a hot day in the summer, is it?
No, it's not. And it's been fun. But ultimately, what we're here to do is not talk about the weather or how bad it sucks to mow over 100 yards in a month. What we are here to talk about is Kitty Genovese and the bystander effect. And I think it's I've mentioned this in the last episode, that it's important that we understand that the Kitty Genovese case is how we ended up on the bystander effect, but the bystander effect is more of what we came on the debrief to talk about.
That's right, yeah. It's a psychological phenomenon that I find very fascinating. And it's just wild to me that the more people that witness something, or the more people around when something is happening, the more likely that no one is going to interfere because they feel comfortable that someone else will do it for them.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to maybe reflect back on something that might have happened to you where you thought, well, maybe someone else will take care of that. And I had heard about this case long before I was even in law enforcement. I just in passing, I did some psychology classes in college, but it wasn't something that stuck out to me even when I started working in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. I knew I haven't listened to any podcasts on this. I'm sure there are some out there. I'm sure there's TV shows. I've known about it. It's kind of like one of those things that's been operating in the background, but I just didn't realize it was there. Right.
And I actually heard about this case when I was in high school. Wow. And one of the members of my class did a 9 weeks project. And
9 weeks?
Yeah. So there's 4 9-week periods in a school year, or a quarter. And so one of our classes just called it a 9 weeks project. And every quarter in that class, you had to do a big project where you went, a deep dive, and you had to make like a visual aid, the whole 9, things like that people are probably doing on like their tablets now.
Oh, yeah.
But you had to make like a poster board and present it, maybe even wear a costume if you wanted them extra brownie points, which I never did. But I would like to point out that one time I did 2 of mine, one on the Ghostbusters.
Solid.
And the science behind that, even though I know it's based in fiction, still cool. And also how a nuclear weapon works. And I got a lot of strange looks from my class about that.
Yeah, they definitely thought you were going to do something terrible.
I've always been kind of a weirdo, but in a cool, edgy way.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, but you're not going to kill me, are you?
So anyway, it always bothered me that this happened. Even something that happened long before I was born. long before I was born. I'd
Yeah.
like to say that again. That this happened because she was just coming home, and this monster,
Yeah.
Winston Moseley, was literally out just being a predator.
Just looking to kill somebody.
That's right, a woman.
Yeah,
and
specifically a
he
woman.
even would go on to say that later. He wanted to kill a woman because it's easier and they don't fight back as much.
Yeah.
And later we would find out, or anybody that would research this would find out, that he had killed and sexually assaulted 2 other women, as well as dozens of burglaries in the area. This guy was just a monster.
Yeah.
Who wanted to hurt people, women, because that's what got his jollies off. And that really sucks. And he's dead now. So
Yeah, I mean, definitely your classic sociopath, because he had no reason to even commit the burglaries.
No.
He had a good job. He just either liked the thrill of it or he really didn't care. And then I don't know if the burglaries escalated into the murders and the rapes.
yeah, I don't know that either.
But he had, I mean, anybody looking from the outside would probably, that's why I said they probably wouldn't even suspected Moseley, because he had no criminal history.
Right, married with kids. In fact, he left his wife sleeping in bed at 2 a.m. to go murder and sexually assault somebody, which he did do, and that's demented.
Yeah.
That's psychotic, and I'm not sure if just 3 will get you the serial killer title, although I've read that 3 is the mark,
Right.
For being considered a serial killer, but he's definitely a monster and a total creep.
Yeah, and so let's kind of get into why how we got here. We talked about this in the episode before this, but Kitty was leaving the bar that she worked at. She drove back to her apartment where that was. Moseley spotted her before she even got back there, and followed her to her apartment, which is just creepster.
Yeah,
level 10.
The worst part, the part that really hurt me the most, is she knew.
When she gets out of her car, parks, starts walking, she sees Moseley behind her, following her. She doesn't even give it a second thought that he's not following her. She knew in her mind, this guy is coming after me, so she takes off running.
And he just runs her down, stabs her in the back, probably trying to figure out his next move when a neighbor yells out the window after Kitty screams that she's getting stabbed.
And this guy's gonna kill her.
Yeah, and she just this guy leans out the window and says, "Hey,
let her alone."
Yeah. And of course, with that guy, Winston Moseley's like, "Oh dang, somebody saw me do that. I got to dip."
It almost worked.
It almost worked, and that's an issue that we're going to jump into in a moment.
There was a little lack of follow through on what needed to happen after that, and this guy would later. I mean, he might have been thinking in his head like, "That's as far as my involvement goes," and we'll talk about it later. But legally, he's actually right, and so or at least in Texas, he's right. So she gets stabbed multiple times. Moseley runs away. And the thing that really kind of put me in a spot where I felt really bad for Kitty was that she knew that she was injured. I don't know if she knew she was mortally wounded, but she had to at least find some relief in the fact that Moseley ran away. And he did not, but he didn't leave. And that's the way that this unfolds, is that he goes and parks his car basically around the corner and just waits and listens to see if anybody comes. And how brazen of an act is that I think the average person, and this is kind of goes into that, the kind of person that Moseley is, this psychopath, he waits. He doesn't run home. He doesn't climb back in bed with his wife and pretend that nothing happened. He doesn't say, "Well, I guess I'll try again later." He goes around the corner and waits and listens. And when he doesn't hear anything, he decides he's going to go back and finish what he started.
Well, I mean, he probably thought, she saw me.
Yeah.
If she lives, she's going to say what happened and my life is over. And
did she get a good look at my face?
Right. And so when he doesn't hear the sirens, because in a place like Manhattan, you're going to hear them coming.
Yeah.
And he's going to know he's got time to split.
Yep.
And so when he doesn't hear them, he's like, okay.
Change my hat.
Right. I'm going to go ahead and pull a Clark Kent.
Yeah.
I'm going to put on my disguise Nothing against Clark Kent. Superman's is the business, but he changes his appearance just enough that he thinks he can get back to her, and he has to go find her.
Yep.
And it's so sad. And I imagine there was blood and things that he could follow, and it did lead him back to her where he finishes her off.
Yeah, he finds her in the vestibule, and he stabs her several more times. She's got defensive wounds. He sexually assaults her, and I think you were the one that pointed out to me earlier when we were talking about this, is that he had a thing about murdering women and then sexually assaulting them.
Yes.
After.
Right, because later he would be diagnosed as a necrophile.
Right.
As somebody who enjoys that type of thing, which, as if he could get creepier, that was just
a little extra.
It was, yeah. Now you have no doubt in your mind. You don't throw around a word like necrophile easily, and unless you're a high schooler making a joke.
Yeah. And so he kills her. Well, and that's the deal. He probably believes that she's dead, and they would later say that she died. There'd be a witness that kind of muddies the water a little bit on that later. But the fact of the matter is that she is either dead or mortally wounded, and she's been sexually assaulted. And then after all of this happens is when a neighbor finally comes down and finds Kitty and calls the police. And the police show up and they start their investigation. But one of the things that I thought that was pointed out in the research that I did was the police automatically suspected her girlfriend, Mary. And I didn't know if it was because of the relationship that they had.
Right.
Because they were an actual couple, or if it was because they were starting at the person that she lived with, because
of course,
more than likely, you like I said, you're killed by somebody you know.
Right. It's like, when you're doing detective work, they use the ripple theory. You check the closest ripples to the source, and if that doesn't give you your answer, you
start working your way out.
Right. And so that makes sense. And if he wasn't caught on a burglary later, frankly, they might have never found out.
No.
But he admitted it.
That also goes into the sociopath, because once he was caught on a burglary, he spilled the beans on 3 murders.
That's right, because
he wanted them to know what he was out there doing.
There's that weird thing that villains often want to get caught, because now their accolades become public.
Yeah, because 57 years later, we're still talking about it.
That's right.
So,
but in the initial reports, they mentioned that 38 people witnessed it, either audibly or visually, and did nothing. Now, there are conflicting reports that number is erroneous, but the example I talked about before this episode, and I'll say it again, even if you cut that number in half, even if you took 20 off the top, even if you took 30 off the top, nobody did anything.
Right.
Now, I realize that's very early in the morning, and most of us are asleep if you have a regular job.
You can probably relate to this if you've ever lived in an apartment complex. I mean, I have, you have, we've all lived in an apartment, because there's some wild stuff going on in the night hours. And so,
you're more likely, you hear cars rolling through the parking lot at the devil's hour. It's probably a cop.
Yeah.
Coming to see what somebody called on somebody, which is a good sign. Yeah. Does it feel intrusive to some people? Maybe, but that's a good sign. The cop showed up to look around.
Yeah.
Even if he finds nothing, people now know the cop is rolling through there, and that's good.
Yep.
You want to know that your apartment complex has that type of accessibility to law enforcement. If somebody calls about 40 teenagers having a wild pool party on a Sunday night, like I had to deal with last week, that somebody's going to come along and run those little punks out of there.
Yeah.
I swear I'm not an old man, but they were punks.
Yeah. And you got to get up early. You ain't got time for this.
I don't, man. I got to get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah. You ain't got time for this.
I don't, man. Cool. Enjoy a pool during business hours. Then head back to your tree house or wherever you kids hang out these days.
Yeah. Rewind 20 years and we would have been the kids by the pool. So
I wasn't going to say that part.
Yeah. But we understand. But, but still, like, you weren't the one that called the cops. So it's not like you're a Debbie Downer in that way. Or were you the one that called the cops?
No.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No, I really wasn't.
All right, let's keep going.
But I did drive by after
recording. Get you in a jam.
Don't do that. They're like, oh man, that Mike is a buzzkill.
Yeah.
What a
Buzz Killington over here.
A snitch.
Yeah, Mike is a snitch.
But, when you hear about the case, that's terrible. But the bystander effect is what really fascinates me.
Yeah.
It absolutely just blows my mind that this phenomenon it got its label from this incident, but there's so many things it tracks back to. The longer I sat and thought about it, I thought about all these times I had witnessed things, or been involved in things, or especially in law enforcement, you get involved in things where there could be so many witnesses and you're like, this is great. I'm going to have so much help putting together this case for detectives to take over, in my department's case. But you'd be surprised how many people will fall right away at the thought of doing something official, even if it's something that they saw well and could recollect well. They don't want to be involved because it comes with some additional social pressure, like going to court.
Yep.
Having to fill out an official document.
Sign your name on it. Your address is on there.
That's right. Being caught talking to the cops.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really sad to me that people view it that way, because it just gives me like a really bad impression of the human race.
Yeah.
And
we're not talking about, like I mentioned earlier, we're not talking about, little Billy putting bubble gum in Susie's hair. We're talking about some things where, it's either a violent crime or even someone running a red light and hitting somebody, and we weren't there. And so this guy's like, yeah, this lady blew this red light, or this guy blew this red light, T-boned him. We're like, cool, can you fill out this affidavit for me? And they're like, oh,
wait, do I have to go to court on this? Yeah. And I'm not joking. That's what they say. Wait, will I have to go to court? And you're like, if it goes to court, but with, the more statements that we have of the observation of the incident, the less likely they're going to go to court. But they're like, I'm not risking that.
No,
Thanks,
I
though.
don't want to do that.
And you know what? That is their right, but it just looks bad.
Yeah. And it's even kind of crazy if you have multiple witnesses that see the same event, but they all have a slightly different idea of how it went down.
Yeah. And that comes down to the officer and definitely to the detectives later, if they're investigating the case, is who they think saw what.
Yeah.
So if you have 3 people that tell you the facts of the case and then a 4th person who's on the other guy's side, you're like, do I still need to take this statement / affidavit? Yes, but you're going to want a second look. You're going to want a few more moments to be like, hey, man, show me where you were standing when you saw this.
Yeah.
Do you know this person and you're just covering for them? Because that happens too.
Absolutely.
But it just boggles me that people are so willing to do that.
Well, and then I mentioned this a little bit, but I wanted to talk about, or you get the complete opposite of that. You get the person that, like, you get out of your car and they're like running up there to be like, hey, saw the whole thing. I witnessed everything. And you're like, okay, can you fill out this affidavit for me? And they're like, absolutely. You turn around, the next thing you know, they're over there talking to the news cameras. They're telling you about how, 25 years ago they were doing this and that, and that they're pretty sure their neighbors are selling drugs, and they've got the kids that are running down the street.
They were abducted by aliens.
Yeah, it's graffitiing
you do get those wild people.
I'm like, okay, and they're like, so if you could beef up some security around my house, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and you get all these wild stories, and you're like, oh my good, there's got to be a balance in there, people.
That's it. You got to weed them out and
be the person that makes it so that we don't have to get an affidavit from that guy. If you could.
Yeah, please.
If you don't mind, because sometimes that can be a little frustrating, but it is also our jobs to stand there patiently and listen.
And that's what you're getting paid for.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
That's why you get paid the big
bucks.
That's
right. But yeah, the more people that witness something, the less likely they are to be involved. Literally shucking any type of social responsibility or social pressure of responsibility to the next person because you don't want to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Somebody will do it.
Right.
It just doesn't have to be me.
It's crazy. That's what people think. It doesn't have to be me because someone else will do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that if you see a violent act being committed, you should run into the middle and put up your hands and be like, whoa, man, not cool.
Yeah.
We don't want anybody to get hurt.
No.
I don't want anybody to get hurt. But make a scene. Yell that you could see what they're doing. Act like you're recording them. Call 911.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, somebody's out here getting smacked around with a bat at this location. And they're like, the operator, the call taker will probably want to know some more details. Give them the details. You don't have to go over there and be like, hey, man, what's your name? Do with the bat. Quit swinging.
Yeah.
Hey, what's your name? No.
I got you on camera. I got you. You just get whacked in the head after that.
Yeah, don't do that. I don't want anyone to get hurt doing these types of things, but it costs you nothing to be a good witness.
Yeah, and I was going to go into that whenever you started this, is that even if you're the average person that is on the streets, or you're a off-duty cop or something like that, one of the things that was always kind of told to me was, if you don't have a opportunity to intervene, then you need to make sure that you are at the bare minimum, a good witness. And so that's why, like, when Mike's saying we don't want anybody to get hurt, we don't. But if you have the availability to just be a good witness and see what's going on, or like Mike said, shout out and be like, hey, don't do that, or whatever the case is, at least do something like that.
Yeah.
I was at a bar and grill type establishment several years ago, but I walked outside to leave, and me and my buddy were standing in the parking lot, and this guy walks out to his truck and just pulls a gun out of the back of his pants, fires like 3 rounds into the ground and then 2 rounds into the air. And all we did was I just yelled, hey, at him, and he turned around and saw me, and we had some coverage by some vehicles, and then we didn't have much past that. And the hey was just instinctual for me. Yeah. I didn't even think about doing it. I just did it. But the guy turns over and realizes that someone's out in the parking lot, runs and jumps in his truck and drives away. And he's probably just a drunk dude being an idiot. Mm-hmm. Very reckless idiot. But that was the situation, Yeah. It was just like that, and boom, it was done.
That's it. And I would go so far as to say that even if you did that in an incident, a violent incident, maybe someone being attacked, and you just yelled, hey, that might snap the aggressor into knowing he's being watched, and hopefully drive him away. And so that person, somebody can call 911 for the victim if they're debilitated from the attack, or give them a chance to get away and get in their own car and leave. Mm-hmm. But give that person a chance, even if you just had to yell hey at a stranger.
Yeah, and that's why we mentioned that it almost worked for Kitty, that the guy yelling out the window, it almost worked, but it ended up not working out.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, back and forth, that you had some witnesses that said that they called in and said that they called the police, and the police did not take down their message or think that it was important, or whatever the case could be. But I know that in this situation, I don't know how much could be done for Kitty after she was already stabbed multiple times, but I know that regardless of if it was the police dropped the ball and didn't prioritize this call as something they should have went to, someone going out there and at least checking on her, or trying to intervene in some sort of way. Mosley was looking and waiting to see if there was some sort of intervention. And I think that it could have been literally anything.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that
but there wasn't. If
he came back around the corner in his new costume,
and there's 2 or 3 people standing there, he's like, well, I'm out of here.
Yeah, he'd have to dip. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. But that's the phenomenon that we're talking about, is nothing did happen. She was left to expire after he came back and finished the job. And I think that as time has gone on, like you said very eloquently, it transcends time and technology. We're living in a time where we are witnessing and recording incidents of all manner at a geometric rate. And by geometric rate, I mean we are taking up hard drive server space all over the world, filling it with so much crap and people are doing it for the lulz and the likes and the follows and the shares, and not for the reason of, hey, I witnessed something crazy. Where I could have used this to call, as a time to, record this and call the police, or forward it to the police, or at the police, because Lord knows every police department in America's got a Twitter handle.
Yeah, they do. And it's sad in some instances where people would rather not interfere with their video than to cut the video and call the police. You know, and content creators that literally make their living ruining people's lives in one way or the other.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing how it trickles down, at least in my mind, how it goes from not getting involved, with the bystander effect, but also how people are so open and willing to just record people at will. And the courts will hold up that when you're outside, you have no expectation of privacy. And so you could be the guy who's having the worst day of his life, lost his job.
Sorry, anybody, if they heard my dog. She's sawing logs right now.
She was too. But walks in on his significant other, having their way with another person. And he's like, man, I lost my job and watched my significant other just getting it with somebody else. My life is in the dumpster. So he goes out and he gets him a 40 to go brown bag it sitting on the curb because he's contemplating his existence. And somebody records him and they're like, look at this jabroni.
Yeah, look at this loser sitting on the side of the street with
crying into a brown bag special.
Yep.
But they have no idea what that person is going through. To them, it's just funny. And they're just doing it to get likes. And man, that says a lot about culture to me. I'm not saying it isn't.
I'm not saying I don't even sometimes. I'm just like everybody else where when I get on the social medias, I'm like, funny videos are popping up across the feed all the time. And it's entertaining, especially when people are doing it in good fun.
Right.
What is not in good fun or what's bad is whenever people are going out and recording people in the worst moments of their life.
That's right. Yeah, that's not funny. And because they're not worried about this person at all, they're just worried about what everyone's going to think of their 17-second video laughing at the guy crying into a paper bag with a 40 of Bud Ice.
Man. Oh man, that's rough too.
And they're only like $2.
Yeah.
But I have an example of one that of what I would consider the bystander effect when I was a law dog.
Yeah.
And so there's a skate park here in Amarillo, and it is to the brim with kids in the summer. Why wouldn't it be? But I get a call out there for somebody who was assaulted, and it says right in the call screen, smacked in the head with a skateboard deck. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking that probably hurt.
Yeah,
having been smacked with a skateboard can confirm.
Yes,
it does hurt. It doesn't matter what part of that skateboard hits you. It's made to not break.
Yeah.
And so I get out there, and there's this little young buck waving me down. And so I get out, and he has a significant knot on his head.
So you found the guy.
No, he waved me down.
Yeah.
And so already I'm in my cruiser and I jump out and it's like Moses parting the Red Sea.
Oh yeah.
They are flowing away from me like water. Every teenager is getting the heck away from me. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine it's for various reasons, but also it's a cop.
Yeah.
At 11:30 at night. And so they're like, oh no.
Yeah.
I don't want him to find the bag of shake in my pocket.
Yeah, I was about to say, you still got that dime bag on you, and everybody just runs away.
Exactly. And so he comes over and he tells me this kid hit him in the head with a skateboard deck. They were beefing. Mm-hmm. And the kid smacked him with a skateboard. And I'm like, I see that, man. Are you okay? He's like, I'm dizzy. I'm like, do you need an ambulance? He's like, no. I'm like, how old are you? He's like, I'm 17. I'm like, okay, I'm going to call you an ambulance. He's like, no, I can't. I'm going to get out of here. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I just wanted to tell you it happened. Slow down. If somebody assaulted you with a skateboard, just show me where they are and we'll figure this out. I'll make a report. Something can happen. He's like, no, I can't. They'll kill me. Okay, I know. I chuckled too. It took everything in my power to not laugh. I said, what do you mean? This 17-year-old kid was mortified that this other kid that he's beefing with at the skate park, who smacked him with a skateboard, was terrified at the thought that if he reported him by name that he would get killed and he wasn't going to rat on him.
Yeah.
Total mob mentality. That's the term I used to throw around.
Yeah.
Mob mentality. Schools have it in droves. Like kids, they will not rat on each other. They don't want to be considered a snitch.
No.
Now hopefully there isn't a sect of Amarillo School District where these kids are so fearsome that they're burking each other over getting snitched on. But this kid was...
He believed it was going to happen.
Yeah, he would not tell me anything else. And I was like, so basically, I can do nothing. I can't do anything if you don't give me the facts, if you don't give me a name. Did it at least happen here? And he's like, yeah, it happened right over there. I'm like, okay, all I have is a location, my man. You won't even give me your name. And legally, I have no reason to make him give me his name. Mm-hmm. I tried to get it. He refused. He didn't want to make a report either, which begs the question, what was I even doing there, people? You're right. You ever see a cop just standing in a parking lot talking to a bunch of people, and then they laugh about something, get back in their car and drive away, and you're like, what is that cop doing? That, guys, that's what cops are doing. They're trying to do their job, but somebody doesn't want to say nothing. And guess what? Being a psychic or a telepath of any kind is not a prereq at the Amarillo Police Department. So if you don't tell a cop what's the matter, they're not going to know.
Yeah.
And so I drove away, and that kid did leave. He said he lived nearby, and he took off on foot. When I say took off, he ran. Yeah. He didn't skateboard. He was woozy.
No.
So I told him he'd best not.
Further injure yourself.
Yeah, then I'd have to call an ambulance, and it wouldn't be his choice because he's, a danger to himself and others. But he took off, and so I left, and I was like, that stuck with me for a couple of weeks because it happened in front of dozens and dozens. I'm talking, this skate park is packed. Yep. There's got to be 100 kids in, and nobody said nothing.
Yeah, and I think this is a good segue. When you were telling me that story, I was thinking about an incident that happened with me, and because when you said when the police are standing there and it's obvious that something happened, but it doesn't seem like a whole lot's going on. One night I was on my way into work, and I passed by an establishment that serves buffalo wings. And as I was driving by, I saw this large crowd of people that were outside. And I'm going to pull into the parking lot because obviously something's happening. Yeah. It's not just people standing out there after a birthday party or something. And there's something happening, and there's some guys that are shuffling around. And then on APD's South Channel, I hear that there is a 10-10, which is a fight at this restaurant. And so I'm there. I don't work for APD, but I'm there. I'm on duty. I pull into the parking lot. I get out, and there's these 4 guys just beating the brakes off this dude right at the front of the building. And as soon as I pull up, the 4 guys break off of the dude that's getting beat up, and he jumps up and runs away. And I'm like, okay, what? I'm like, hold up. Everybody get over here. I'm by myself. Yeah. There's a ton of people out there. I'm like, you guys come over here. I'm like, what happened? And these 4 guys were like, well, we're sitting inside the bar, and this guy right here punched this girl in the face 2 times, stood up from his chair, punched her in the face twice. So I walked over there, and I was like, hey, that ain't how we do this. And the guy shoved me. He said, so me and my buddies drug him outside, and we gave him the business. That's right. And I'm like, right on, I can agree with that.
Yeah, and if y'all are listening, thank you.
Yeah, if you guys are listening, thanks. And but I have to separate my personal beliefs with what's going on. So I'm like, okay. So I go into the bar, and I find the table that they were sitting at, and there are 2 girls that are there. And the 2 girls are the girl's cousin who got assaulted. And I say, okay, what happened? They tell me the same story. And I'm like, okay, where's the girl at? She left. I'm like, what's her name? We're not going to tell you. I'm like, what's your name? They don't want to tell me. And I know there's a lot of videos going on where the police are walking up, and they're like, hey, you got your ID, man? And then people are like, penal code says, oh, I don't have to give you my ID. We don't operate like that. Yeah. And we didn't operate like that. We weren't just walking up to Joe on the street and being like, hey, buddy, what are you doing? Oh, he's like, got your ID? But so I can't make them make a statement. I can't make them tell me who the victim was. So I'm standing there with these 4 guys that beat this dude up. The dude's gone. There's a victim that he assaulted that's gone. And I've got witnesses that won't tell me who anybody is.
That's right. You're missing almost every element of the offense.
So I have nothing. Yeah. And as I'm getting ready to leave, the guy walks back up, and he's like, you want to arrest me? Arrest me then. And it's the guy that was getting beat up. And he's like, but what about them? So I handcuffed the guy, put him in the back of my car, and I go talk to him, and I'm like, hey, what happened tonight? He's like, I'm not telling you anything. And I'm like, okay. So I go back to the 2 witnesses. Please give me something. Yeah. Give me something so that I can put this guy in jail. Yeah. And they refused. Yep. And so I took that guy to jail for disorderly conduct and public intoxication because that's all I had on him. Yeah. And I knew he was a scumbag. Yep. And the people that were like the guy that I arrested was like, what about them? They beat me up. And I said, oh, that'll be in my report, sir. Yeah. But I'm not taking any of them to jail.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's so bad that if the judge finds that they need to be arrested, and there'll be a warrant for them.
Yeah, it'll come out later, and they'll be arrested. But I can go ahead and tell you that did not happen.
Yeah, not in Texas.
No, that case didn't go anywhere because I went back later and talked to the detectives, and they said that everybody refused to cooperate. And so this man got to beat up somebody. He got to beat up his own cousin, who was a girl, in a bar in front of 80 people.
Yep.
And nobody said anything.
Yep. Except for them 4 dudes that took care of business.
Yeah. And they did what they felt like they had to do. But hey, that, I was okay with that.
Yeah.
I didn't find any faults. And so I told them, they're like, are we getting arrested? And I said, no.
Yeah. But the point is, aside from how cool that I personally, I think that even happened, is that no one wanted to cooperate. And so, of course, what he's saying is, yeah, that guy did go to jail for some Class C offenses.
Yeah, he was out the next morning.
Right. But nothing of permanence happened to him for getting hopped up on the beers.
Yeah.
And punching somebody in the face a couple times for probably something that wasn't worth it.
Yeah, very minor.
Right. And that is a great example and a hilarious story to me because I just imagine that that's exactly what the guy said. That's not the way we do it around here.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, oh, you want a piece of me? And he's like, yeah, there ain't just one of me. There's 4. Let's take a step outside.
Yeah. Take a step outside. You're going to be walking different after this. And that actually happened. I'll save those stories for another time, but you'd be surprised how many times when I was driving through the city, going back out into the county, how many times I just ran across stuff.
Yeah.
I even had a dispatcher one time that was like, hey, you need to find a different way to come to work. Because it was just all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm over here, I'm over there, I'm like, this is happening. And they're like, how do you get
involved in all this?
Yeah. And I was like, I just see it.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in uniform and you're in your patrol car and you're bebopping, heading to work, and you see something that requires law enforcement interference, that's an obligation.
Yep.
And I believe that. And it's good that you did. But going back to what we were talking about, it's such a crazy phenomenon. And that's a great example because they're all like, wait, now that somebody's going to get in possible legal trouble? No, I don't want to help you with this. And for what cause? Why wouldn't they want to? And then, of course, that answer is going to be different for everybody. But it's still, there are incidents where, and I'm sure everyone can think of their own. There's probably people going to be talking as soon as we're talking about this, saying like, oh, well, what about this incident or that incident? This is an example of the bystander effect. You're right. We all probably have many that we can think of, especially in the world of true crime.
Yeah.
And some where people do interfere and the aggressor doesn't back down. Or another great example, which we might talk sometime in the future about Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, how he gets caught. Guess how he gets caught? People willing to interfere. They run him down like a mob and beat him half to death before the police get there, which is a great story. And I don't want to spoil anything for people who are interested in that case. But I know that when I've read it and listened to other pods on it, I'm just chuckling because that's how it should happen. It costs you nothing to be a good witness, but if you also feel like you have a chance to step up and help somebody in a situation like that, or even a more minor situation, that's great. You should. We should be willing to help our neighbors. And by neighbor, I don't mean the guy across the street you wave at when he's mowing his grass. Yeah. I mean people in your community.
And you need to make sure that you have the capability of defending yourself if that comes about, because situations can turn very sour very fast. And that's why I say either, shout out, say something, or just be a good witness, because there was a guy also that was the manager of a convenience store, and these 2 guys were fighting out in the parking lot, and he went out there to break the fight up, and them dudes just beat him up.
Yeah. I don't want that to happen to anybody.
Yeah, like pretty bad too.
Yeah, that is really sad. I hope that guy convalesced very well. But if you don't feel like you can do that, then don't. But use your smartphone if you have one. Yell something. I mean, do it from behind a locked door. It doesn't matter. If you make a scene, you can at least say that you tried to help that person. And I think that goes a long ways, because if no one else was going to do it, and I'm sure that's why in the reverse idea of the bystander effect, you could do something instead. Maybe it doesn't have the result you wanted, but you still did something. Yeah. Instead of thinking, well, someone else will do it. Because as we can see, and I'm sure think of other examples, it doesn't happen like that.
Nope, not all the time. I think we can point out, too, that there are situations like you were just saying, how some things fall into it and some things don't. But I was glad that this, at least the silver lining in this, is that it got people talking about it, because some people say that this was an example of the bystander effect. Some people say that it wasn't and that it was debunked, but it did get the conversation at least going in the way of coming across like what this actually is.
Yeah.
And not only that, but a 911 system.
That's right. Yeah. And now it's pretty thorough, and it's nationwide, it's worldwide, and they ask a lot of questions, and some questions that might not be pertinent. And if you listen to enough 911 calls, you can hear people get pretty frustrated about that. But it's all based on a system. You got to have information, because even in a modern setting, that they might know where you're at, and they're going to send a police officer there, but they need as much information as possible. They want to know as much information so that that cop's not walking into a situation that he or she can't handle, or how many officers that might be needed.
Yeah, because as they're listening to the phone call, they're typing out basically everything you're saying. They're getting descriptions, they're getting names, they're getting situations, and all of this is being forwarded to the officer's computer that's in his car. And, you know, if you've ever seen a Cops episode where they're driving down the road and you can hear the little bell or dill that like going off inside the car, like these are updates that are happening in real time, and everybody can see them if they want to see them, if they're on the call screen. But they're doing all this in real time, and that is one of the things that really helps the officers out. So if you think some of the questions are like, oh, this is why are they asking all of these stupid questions? It is a system. You're exactly right.
Yeah, it's just based on statistics. Like, what could this, in this particular instance, say a 1010? They're going to want to know descriptions of everyone involved. Is there a weapon? Does somebody appear hurt? If they're hurt, how hurt are they? Do you think they need an ambulance? Which are more than likely going to send one anyway, but they're probably still going to ask that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is good. And, you know, it's sad that it takes something like that to progress, especially in the world of law enforcement. But it's how it works.
Yeah. Or even if you, like you say, if you want to be a good witness and you call and 911 answers the phone, and you only have a brief amount of time to, say, rattle off a license plate or do anything like that, use that time if you can. When they answer the phone, it's recording. So everything that you say will be on a recorded line that they can go back and listen to later. So if you call 911 and you say, it's a white male, red shirt, blue jeans, he's getting into a red S10 Chevy pickup, license plate number, and you just rattle that all off at the beginning, and they can say, okay, slow down, you know, because they're not going to know that, you know, exactly what's happening. They're going to say, slow down, tell me what's going on. Okay, now that's off. That you don't have to think about that anymore. It's in. Say, okay, there's a guy, and he just did this, and this is a situation, and then they can go back and listen and be like, okay, here's all the information we need.
Right.
We've got it in the beginning of that call.
Yeah. Like I said, it's terrible. That's what it takes for these things to progress like that. But it is the cost of such things. You gotta experience drives the process of innovation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are, like I said, the silver lining to this, obviously anybody that can go back and say, is the life worth what came about? I am definitely not going to say yes or even try to justify how that works out. But unfortunately, this is how we progress as a society. If you see, like when the caller said, or the neighbor said, well, my dad called in and they didn't have a record of it, because at the time they got pen and paper.
Yep.
And they're writing down calls, and they're trying to prioritize what calls are more important in a large city. There's obviously going to be a lot more stuff going on, and that's why I kind of identified it. It's like a triage system in a hospital. You have to take these incoming calls and see which one needs the most amount of attention, or if it's going to take more officers. And you have to go like that. If you're working in a city where, let's say, the officers that are on duty that night is light, you don't have a whole lot of police officers that are working that night, and you call in and say, I think there's someone prowling around my cars, and you've got a robbery that happened on one side of town and a assault or something terrible that, you know, a gunshot victim, or, you know, that's going on another side of town. Guess what? your call's probably going to pend.
Right.
And don't get upset when the police don't show up right away because, probably just something you heard outside that scared you. And I understand people are going to say, well, sometimes it's real. I'm just saying, from a person sitting on the other side of the phone that you've only given them the information that they have, they're going to make a decision based off that. And that's why it's really important to be as descriptive and detailed as you possibly can.
Absolutely.
Don't oversell it. Don't go in there and say something that's not true, because that can ultimately fall back.
Yeah, it also happens quite a bit. Yeah. You don't want that to happen. It's part of a system, and we are learning a little bit about where it came from with this case, and it's very interesting. And personally, I don't think that this is a debunked example of the bystander effect. I feel like it did happen, and that's unfortunate.
Well, there's no evidence of the contrary. You can't, if the guy's saying, and I'm glad you said that, because that's something that I wanted to bring up. Why would someone that is in a situation like that say that they didn't call the police? Whenever the police come around, they're like, hey, this girl's getting murdered out here and y'all did nothing. Why would somebody not be like, oh, no, I tried to call the police.
Yeah.
You put people in a situation where they have to try to defend themselves against something that now they realize was a very heinous crime.
Yeah, quite serious. Yeah.
And it also works the other way. What if the police officer that was working that night, or call taker, however it worked back then, was just busting a snooze.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever he answered the phone saying, hey, man, I heard a girl screaming down here. And he's like, okay, we'll send somebody out. Hangs up the phone. He's like, yeah, that stuff happens all the time. And they don't put any significance on it because there are no other details. There's a woman screaming outside. Do you think the call probably would have went different if they said, there's a woman screaming outside? I'm pretty sure she's been stabbed. She said, help me. I've been stabbed.
Right.
He's going to kill me. That would have been the information that would have been
very
would have
pertinent.
been. Yeah. And so if that is the situation, and now the officer gets called in and they're like, hey, Bill, did you get any calls last night about a woman getting attacked over in Queens? He's like, and they're like, yeah, there's a girl that was killed over there. And immediately he's going to be like, nope.
Yep. What do you mean?
No, I didn't get any phone calls about that. It was oddly quiet last night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I did get the call later on, that somebody found a woman lying in a breezeway that had been stabbed, but I sure don't remember anything before that. Because he's not going to get fired from his job. And so this is why, like, when you call into any department, sheriff's office, whatever, all the lines are recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that comes in. That's
exactly right.
The numbers are logged, what time it is. Or like if you've ever listened to a radio, any radio traffic, and you always hear the police officer or the dispatcher say something, and then they'll say 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is logged, or if even they have to go back and listen to that, they know the timestamp is on everything.
That's right. No matter how minor, because it's someone's responsibility somewhere.
Yep.
Law enforcement especially has a duty to try to do the best that they can with the information that they have available.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't think that just falls to law enforcement personally. I think that in the end, you should try to be a good person and help people that need it. Again, if you have the means to do so.
Yeah. If you're available to do it.
Because I've had examples like that too. Big old barbecue gone wrong on the south side of Amarillo. All these people out duking it in the street. The dude comes out and he takes out his pistol and he fires a round off into the ground and chases everybody off, and they scatter like roaches. And of course, what are the 911 calls about?
The gunshot,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Cops show up. The dude tells me what happens. That dude didn't get in any trouble, although it was close, because you can't be busting rounds off in a municipality.
No, you cannot do that.
But the
discharge a firearm in a municipality.
Right. But the other elements of the offense made it so that they had a little lenience. They're like, oh, okay. They were people out coming at each other with 2x4s in the street, and he went out and broke it up. Great example. A little extreme.
Mm-hmm.
That's for everyone to decide for themselves.
To each their own.
Personally, I didn't see a problem with it. It had the effect he wanted. They stopped doing it and they ran off. Now, if they scheduled a time later to duel it out, that's cool, I guess. With 2x4s, sounds dangerous, but he got the result he wanted. And you know what? While we're talking about it, before we go ahead and close this up, there are people out there that do these things, that do interfere. You see videos on the social medias, on the interwebs of people helping police or helping people in need. And to that, I tip my cap.
Yeah.
You should.
Yeah.
If you have the chance to help somebody, you should. Not only will you find it deeply fulfilling, but it's the least you could do in that moment for somebody who's having the worst day of their life.
Yeah, there was not too long ago. Well, it's been a little while, but just right over here by the cell phone store by my house, I was driving back from work, and there was a car right off the access road parked in the turning in to where you turn into the cell phone store, and there's these two girls that are standing next to a car, and I mean they're just throwing haymakers at each other, just right in the. And I'm like, what in the world? So I pull up and I stop and get out. And I'm like, hey, what are y'all doing? And I don't know what the situation is.
Right, yeah.
And it turns out these two girls were sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And they got into an argument in the car, and they decided to pull the car over and handle it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, so is it done? And I mean, I'm not a police officer anymore.
Right, yeah. You're literally
like,
somebody just stopping to figure out what the heck is going on.
I'm like, is it done? And they're like, yeah, it's done. And then they just get in the car and leave. And I'm like, oh, that was very strange.
That is strange. But a great example of all you didn't physically get involved.
Nope,
you
didn't
just
touch
pulled
anybody.
Up and said, what the heck are y'all
I'm
doing?
Like, hey, what are y'all doing?
Yeah.
And they stopped fighting and looked at me, and I was like, they're like, oh, and then they told me, they're like, oh, we got into an argument, and I was like, do y'all know each other? And they're like, yeah, we're sisters. And I was like, whose car is this? And she's like, mine. And I'm like, where'd you come from? And she's like, because that line of questioning, I think, just never goes away.
No, it doesn't.
And I was like, where'd you come from? She's like, I was in the car with her. And I was like, geez.
Yeah.
You guys just got in an argument in the car and just decided to duke it just right here? And they're like, yeah. I was like, okay. Are y'all both, I guess, both consenting parties?
Yeah, uppercuts are free around there.
Whatever.
Uppercuts, they're like, hey,
I guess y'all have a good time.
That's right. They're like, hey, we're all done. We're going to throw a bag of peas on this. Thanks, dude.
Yeah. Go back to the house, throw a ribeye on one eye, bag of peas on the other, and just
there you go.
Call it a day. And
yeah.
That gets into it. And that gets into where just maybe a little, who knows? I mean, the flip side of that is I could have said, hey, what's going on? And one girl pulls a 25 auto out of her purse and shoots me.
Yeah, well, obviously we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, but we're talking about that type of incident. You can bring up
Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker.
You can bring up Richard Ramirez, and you can bring up other events, like I said, with the manager and things like that. But it's more likely that is not going to happen to you.
Right.
Most people in general, whenever they know that they're being watched, they run.
That's right.
If you're the aggressor, or if you're trying to commit a crime or assault somebody or do something terrible to somebody, once you know that you are being watched, they usually will flee.
Mm-hmm.
And so please, by all means, don't get yourself into a situation where you can get injured. If you don't feel like you can put yourself in that situation, then by all means, be a good witness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if you have to, get yourself out of there. Mike and I were talking about this before the episode started, about what you're obligated to do if you see something like that. And we looked it up, and it's actually kind of interesting if you want to.
Yeah, no, there is no obligation to interfere for like the public. There is, however, it is in the transportation code. Like if you hit a vehicle that's occupied, then you do have to stop and render aid. And it's a crime if you don't do that. I believe it's felony now.
Okay.
But that's only in like a vehicle collision. So there is no legal obligation. You can't get in trouble for not doing it. That's why it's so easy to be like, oh, you need me to fill out a statement? I'm not doing that. Peace out.
Yeah.
And the cop won't say anything when you step off and head out to go, do whatever you're going to do.
And I wanted to bring that up because there's no shame in that game.
No.
If you think that you're going to put yourself in a situation where you could be injured or killed, you have no obligation to act.
Yeah. You don't have to do it. It's just a deeply personal choice.
Right.
But also, even if you do have to fill out an affidavit and you have to go to court, if by chance you do have to go to court, it's not that big of a deal, guys. I've been to court. You go up there, they ask you questions, and they're all questions about things you already know. It's not like it is in Law and Order, where some highly overpaid, well-suited bully is going to try to corner you on the facts. They're going to be like, did you say this? You're like, yes, I did say that. And they're like, well, then repeat it for me verbatim. No, it doesn't work like that.
They're not going to do that. I mean, and a lot of times when you fill out your witness affidavit and they call you on the stand, they will, if it is something that looks terrible towards the person they are defending, they will just ask you questions about, like, did you fill out this witness affidavit? Is this your signature? You're like, yes. And they're like, that's all for me.
Done.
They don't want to talk about it.
It's also really good because it lets you find out if you can still fit into your best clothes.
Yeah, that's good.
It does. Yeah, you're going to want to wear something. Don't be the guy that shows up with a pop collar polo and some baggy slacks and
frosted tips
and his tennis shoes. Yeah, don't be that guy. It's the court of law, people. Put on your Sunday best just for a little stroll down there, if it even gets that far, because I can assure you, the more people that see it, that say something, the less likely it's gonna go to court.
Yep, and so you can also answer in very short form.
That's right.
And they will ask you questions, and if you want to, you can say yes or no.
Yeah.
You don't have to elaborate on anything. And I would also say that it is in your best interest if you don't start elaborating on things.
Yeah, you don't,
because then they can really start digging into what you're saying.
That's right. So
you answer the questions that are asked to you, and you don't say anything else. If there's something that they want to talk to you about, they will ask you specifically. You don't have to get on one of these rants where you're talking about all kinds. Just
stick to the facts.
Stick to the facts and don't say anything else.
Exactly. If that even happens, guys,
very unlikely.
We're just saying it costs you nothing to be a good person. And we should all strive to be good people, because in the end, in my opinion, that's all that really matters.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that we will go ahead and call that for the episode. There's a lot of information there, and Mike and I he brought it to me a little while back and thought that it would be a good episode to talk about, and I agreed with him, and it took a little bit to get it on the list, but we really wanted to dive into the bystander effect and how that works out, and also bring up the Kitty Genovese case and how all of this kind of came to be, and hopefully we did that for you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something to think about, and it is really interesting to look into, and I wonder where everybody lies in that space about how exactly the bystander effect works. I'm interested to know if anybody wants to say, hey, here's how I feel about it, or hey, here's an example where I did or did not do that. I'd be interested to know.
Yeah.
Because we all see a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah.
Everybody's experiences are different, and that'd be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, that's where we're going to leave it for this episode. We'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the episode. We're really glad that you're here and that you're listening and you're supporting us. We noticed that the numbers are starting to tick in the upward direction on downloads and likes, subscriptions, and all of that jazz, if you will. If you guys are looking for us, by the way, on any of these social medias, we are on Facebook. If you need to search for us, it is facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on the old Instagrams, which we got a few new subscribers this week, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. And as always, please, if you are listening to this, go on to the platform that you're listening on, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, let everybody know that you're listening to the podcast, tell your friends, tell your family, and if you think we are worthy of it, please hit that 5 stars.
Hit it, 5.
5 stars. We
got
High 5. Yeah, we got a couple more this week, so please do that, and thank you to everyone that has. Leave us a comment. If you need to ask us a question, maybe it's a more long-form comment, drop us an email. Our email is contact@themurderproject.com, and we will definitely get back to you if you send us anything. It may be Mike, it may be me, and maybe both of us.
Yeah, let's do it.
So if you have any questions, concerns, comments, please make sure and reach out to us. It was so good talking to you guys. I will talk to you guys in the future. But before we go, please remember,
head up, eyes up,
and stay alive.
Later.